The Cottonwood Ditch Company hired a ditch rider in November of 1896, and it was the fourth time in 5 years. And for the fourth time, it was not Verena Kolb. She heard about it at the store. She had ridden that canal with her father from the time she was 9 years old. She knew every headgate and every check and every weak place in 41 miles of it. She had drawn the map the company used, and there had been a reason every time. That is the part that has to be understood about this. Not one of those 4 men was a fool. Not one of those 4 decisions was indefensible. If you had asked any board member on any of those 4 days, he could have told you exactly why, and he would have been telling the truth. 4 good reasons. 4 times. It comes to the same thing as being told you are not good enough, and it takes a great deal longer, and there is nothing whatever you can say about it. Here were the 4 reasons, and she could recite them, and did once to one person. In 91, when Otto Kolb died in March with the water due to come down in 6 weeks, the company gave the ride to a man named Renner, who had been ditch rider on the Sydney Canal for 9 years. Seniority in the trade. Nobody could argue with it, and Verena Kolb did not argue with it. In 93, Renner went to the Platte Valley Company for better money, and the ride went to a man named Pace, who was a board member's nephew and who was also, as it happens, a perfectly competent ditch rider who held the job 3 years without a complaint from anybody. She could not even be angry about it properly. That was the year she stopped sleeping well. In 95, the company decided that what it really wanted was a rider who could also do his own masonry, because the checks on the lower 40 were failing, and a man who could set stone would save them a contractor. Verena Kolb could not set stone. They hired a Swede named Sturm who could, and in November of 96, Sturm having gone home to Sweden, the board hired a young man out of Scottsbluff on the grounds that the job wanted somebody who could be out in all weathers and stay out, and that it was a hard ride for anybody, and that they had a duty to think about what the job actually required. Nobody said the word. In 5 years, not one man on that board ever said the word to her, and she said afterward that if a single one of them had, she would have had something to take hold of. What 4 good reasons do to a person over 5 years is not what 1 bad reason does. A bad reason can be answered. You can go to the man and say that is not true, and here is why, and either he backs down or he does not. And either way, you know where you are standing, and so does he. A bad reason is a thing with edges. 4 good ones have no edges anywhere. Each one is a closed matter the day it is decided. There is nobody to go to, because the man who decided it was right, and he knows he was right, and if you go and see him, he will explain it to you again, kindly, and you will come away agreeing with him and worse off than you were. And the arithmetic of it is only visible from where she was standing. Nobody on that board ever saw 4 decisions. Each of them saw 1 on a Tuesday about a job. She stopped applying after the 3rd. She did not withdraw, and she did not make a point of it, and nobody noticed. In November of 96, the board hired a young man out of Scottsbluff for a job she had not asked for, and she heard about it at the store, and that is a different kind of morning than the other 3 had been. She was 39 years old, and she farmed 80 acres under that ditch, and she had been the best informed person in that valley about that canal since about 1888. Ansel Doak came out to her place on the 11th of December. He was 52, and he had been superintendent of the Cottonwood Company for 2 years, brought in from a company in Colorado after the old superintendent went out, and he was not from that valley and had no relations in it, and was therefore regarded as a man who did not properly understand the situation. The young man from Scottsbluff had lasted 11 days. He had gone out on the 2nd of December in a wind and had come back and said that he would ride the ditch in the spring like a Christian and not in a Nebraska December, and had drawn his time and gone. "I'm not going to pretend this is anything but what it is," said Ansel Doak, standing in her yard. "I've nobody. The board's given me leave to hire whoever'll take it, and there is not a man in this valley who will take a winter ride at what we can pay, and I've asked 11 of them. So I'm the 12th. You're the 12th I've asked, and you're the first one I wanted. And those are 2 different facts, and I'll not have you thinking they're the same." He took his hat off. "Ride the ditch this winter." Verena Kolb stood in her own yard with her hands in her coat and did not say anything for a moment. "There's a board that's told me no 4 times. There's a board that's going to be told," said Ansel Doak, "and I'll hear no more about it. Not from Renner's crowd, not from Pace's uncle, not from anybody. I've 1,300 acres under this ditch, and a canal nobody's looked at since the 2nd of December, and I am past the point of managing anybody's feelings about it." She took it. She did not thank him, and he did not expect it, and she said afterward that the only thing she felt walking back into her own kitchen that afternoon was a kind of flat weariness, because she had been given a thing at last, and the thing she had been given was the leavings, and she was 40 years old and had learned not to be grateful for leavings. What she did not know, and did not find out for 2 months, was that Ansel Doak had gone to the board in November and put her name up for the whole ride and been voted down 4-2, and had then gone away and worked out that there was one job in that company nobody could stop him filling, because nobody else on earth wanted it. He never mentioned the November vote to her. She heard about it from the clerk. Here is what a winter ride is, because it is not what people think. In summer, a ditch rider is a waterman. He runs the headgates and measures the deliveries and settles the arguments, and there are a great many arguments, and the job is mostly diplomacy conducted on a horse. In winter there is no water in the canal to speak of, and no farmers to argue with, and the job is entirely different. It is inspection. You ride the whole length of it, and you look at everything the water has done to it over the season, and everything the frost is doing to it now, the checks, the drops, the flumes, the culverts, the banks where muskrats have been in, the places where the lining has gone, the headgate frames, the wasteways. You do it in winter precisely because the canal is empty and you can get at it and see it. And you do it in Nebraska in December and January, alone, 41 miles out and 41 back, in weather that was genuinely dangerous to be out in and was known to be. Nobody wanted it. That is not a story about prejudice. Nobody has ever wanted it anywhere. Verena Kolb rode it from the 14th of December to the 9th of March, 4 days a week. She went out at first light with a lunch, a hand axe, a coil of wire, a notebook, and a 12-foot lath marked in feet, and she came back after dark, and she did about 20 miles of canal on a day that went well. The cold was not the difficulty. The difficulty was that a ditch rider on inspection is off the horse constantly, down the bank, along the bottom, up onto a check, down again. And a person who is on and off a horse 200 times in a day in wet boots gets into trouble in a way that a person simply riding does not. She lost the feeling in 2 fingers of her left hand in the 3rd week of January and it did not come back properly for 11 years. She filled 4 notebooks. Every culvert, every check, every drop, every place a muskrat had been through a bank with the station number and what wanted doing and what it would take. Ansel Doak said afterward that he had been handed inspection reports for 22 years and had never before been handed one he could hand straight to a contractor. And she was better at it than anybody who had ever done it, and the reason was not diligence. It was that she had ridden it as a child. She had been on that canal at 9 and 11 and 14 years old. In the years when it was being built and enlarged, riding behind Otto Kolb while he checked work, she was too young to understand, and what that meant, 30 years on, was that Verena Kolb was the only living person who had seen the original ditch before the enlargement of 1886. Which is why, on the 22nd of January, she found the water. The Cottonwood Company had been losing something between 1/5 and 1/4 of its water between the headworks and the second lateral for as long as anybody had measured it. That was 11 years of it. Every superintendent had come to the same conclusion, which was seepage in the sand reach below the bluff. Because the sand reach below the bluff is exactly where a canal loses water. And the company had spent a good deal of money puddling it twice, and it got nothing much for it. Verena Kolb was riding the empty canal in a hard freeze in the 3rd week of January, and she noticed, about a mile above the sand reach, that the ice on a pool in the bottom of the canal was rotten and gray and dished in the middle when every other pool for 4 miles was white and hard and flat. Moving water does not freeze like still water. Anybody who has lived on a river knows that. What she was looking at was a place where something was still running under the ice in a canal that had been shut off since October. She got down and chopped it. There was a slow, steady draw under that ice going down and out through the north bank, and it took her the rest of that day and most of the next to open the bank enough to see what it was, and what it was. 4 feet down, under 11 years of silt and bank material, was the old wooden headgate of the original Cottonwood Ditch, the one from before the enlargement. When they had rebuilt and straightened the canal in '86, they had run the new prism across the old alignment, and the old headgate and about 200 yards of the old lateral had been buried under the new north bank. And nobody had closed it. Nobody had thought about it. Everybody who had built the original ditch was dead or gone by 90, and the men who did the enlargement were a contractor's crew out of Omaha who did not know it was there. It had been running full into a buried lateral into a slough 3 miles north since June of 1886. Verena Kolb had seen that headgate as a girl of 11. That is the whole thing. She had held her father's horse while he worked on it in 1882, and she was the only person alive who knew there was a headgate anywhere in that bank at all. She sat down on the frozen bank and looked at it for a while first. What she said about that, once, was that her first feeling was not triumph, and was not even satisfaction. It was a kind of vertigo, because she was looking at 11 years of a whole valley's water going into a slough, and at 2 puddling contracts the company had paid for on a theory that was wrong, and at 4 board meetings about the sand reach, and at the fact that the one person who could have told them was the person they had been not hiring the entire time. And she said that she sat there long enough for it to occur to her that she could simply close the gate and say nothing, and let the company find its water back and never know why, and that she thought about it for a considerable time and was not proud of thinking about it and was not ashamed of it either. Then she closed it herself with a jack, a plank, and 4 hours, and rode into town and told Ansel Doak. The Cottonwood Ditch delivered 1,100 acre-feet more in 1897 than in any year of its existence, and the sand reach turned out to be very nearly innocent. What that meant on the ground was that 11 farms on the lower 40, which had been on short water every August since the ditch was built and had been told for 11 years that it was the sand and that nothing could be done about the sand, got a full season. 2 of those 11 belonged to men who had sat on the board. Neither of them ever raised it with her, and she never raised it with them, and one of them sent a hired man over in the autumn of '97 with 4 hundredweight of seed potatoes and no note, which she accepted, because she was not going to make a stranger stand in a yard holding potatoes while she decided how she felt about his employer. Now the part that matters more. The board did not give her the job. They confirmed her as winter rider in April, which she already had, and in the same meeting they hired a summer rider, a man named Holloway. And the minute book gives the reason, which was that the summer ride requires constant dealing with water users, and the board felt that this was best handled as it had always been handled. Ansel Doak resigned from the superintendency on the spot, in the room, and had to be talked out of it in the hallway by 2 board members and by Verena Kolb, who followed him out and told him that if he went there would be nobody at all, and that she had not spent the winter in that canal to be a reason for the only man in the company who would speak plainly to walk out of it. He stayed 11 more years. She asked him in the hallway why he had done it, and he would not answer her then. What he said in the hallway was that he had a canal to run, but there was a thing he said to her at the gate of her own place about a fortnight later, which she wrote down that night and kept, and which is the only piece of paper from any of this that survives in her hand. "I have been in this business 30 years, he said, and I have never once seen a company lose water the way this one was losing it and have it turn out to be anything but a thing somebody built and forgot. Never once. And I could not find it, and the 3 superintendents before me could not find it, and 11 years of engineers could not find it. And the reason is that not one of us was ever a child on that ditch." He looked at the canal for a moment. They did not pass you over for a job. They passed over the only thing the company actually needed and did not know it had. And the worst of it is that I cannot make that into an argument, because if I say it out loud in that room, what they will hear is that I am fond of you. What she did with the winters, apart from the ride, was teach the canal to whoever would learn it. She took Holloway out in his first march and walked him the whole 41 miles over 3 weeks, structure by structure, and told him everything, including the things that would have let him keep the job against her indefinitely. He said afterward that he had gone out expecting it to be awkward and that she had never once made it so, and that he had never worked with anybody, man or woman, who gave away as much as she did. She was asked about that. What she said was that she was not going to spend her life being the only person who knew a thing, because that is what her father had been. And it had made him necessary, and it had not made him respected, and she had watched the difference for 22 years. She was winter rider for 9 of them and summer rider from 1905. When Holloway went to Wyoming, and the board, which by then had 4 new men on it, gave her the whole ride without any discussion at all that anybody recorded. She held it until 1922, 26 years on that canal, and 41 miles of it, and her father before her for 22. They were married in 1899, which surprised a good many people, and did not surprise anybody who had watched a man resign a superintendency in a board meeting over a hiring decision that did not affect him. She asked him about that once, years later, why he had done it, when it plainly was not going to work, and he had known it was not going to work. And Ansel Doak said that he had not done it to change the vote. He had done it because he had sat in 4 board meetings in 2 years listening to good reasons, and he had found that he could keep his temper about anything on this earth except a room full of men, each being entirely reasonable one at a time. Otto Kolb's canal map, the one Verena had drawn out fair in 1890 at the age of 33 from his notes and her own, and which the company had used ever since without ever putting a name on it, was reprinted by the district in 1924 when they went to blueprint. The draughtsman who did the reprint asked whose map it was. Verena Doak was 67 and had just retired and was in the office that day for something else entirely, and she looked at it on the table for a while. And what she said was, "Put Otto Kolb on it." The draughtsman said that he understood she had drawn it herself. And she said that she had drawn it, and that it was her father's map, and that those were 2 different facts, and he might put down the one that was true. There is a print of it in a district office in that valley today. It says Otto Kolb, ditch rider, 1890 in the corner in a draughtsman's hand, and underneath, in pencil, in a hand nobody has ever identified, and which was certainly not hers, somebody at some point has written, and VK. And that was the story of Verena Kolb, who was passed over 4 times in 5 years for 4 reasons that were every one of them true, and who rode 41 miles of empty canal in a Nebraska January because there was nobody else who would, and who got down off her horse at a gray-dished pool of ice because it looked wrong to her. If somebody once stopped a room full of reasonable men for you, tell me about them in the comments. If this one warmed you tonight, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I hope it found you well. I'll see you in the next one.